taking down the veil, the curtain, and seeing what's behind it, I think is important. And speaking to the customer, using their terminology and really understanding their business is important. And as you and I were talking earlier, artificial intelligence is going to play a key role in that because to use your term, which I love, it will equalize the playing field because now everyone will have access to the same knowledge set. Granted, how you deploy AI is going to be important because there's data privacy concerns. So what you make available to that large language model needs to be well thought out. But let's assume that you've overcome that obstacle. It will equalize the playing field with the business, with the supplier community, and more importantly with your team, because now everyone will have access to that same knowledge base.
Hi, thanks for joining on this week's episode of The Never-Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement for Companies Running SAP. We've got a special guest. He is one of the OGs of procurement and knows more about procurement improvement than anyone I've ever met. Greg Tennyson, thank you so much for joining. We were talking a little bit earlier, and 1984 is a special year, not just for George Orwell's book, but that was a special year for you.
It was. Sean, thank you for the invitation. I look forward to the conversation. 1984, 39 years ago. Yes, George Orwell, and that's when I started my procurement journey. It's interesting, if you will, the commonality. You think back to 1984, George Orwell with doublespeak and the Overlord and walls talking and observing what you're doing. That's where I envision procurement going with technology, with artificial intelligence, large language models, natural language processing. The future is here, and how we leverage it from a procure tech standpoint is going to be interesting. I see some reservations around data privacy and et cetera, but would love to further explore the conversation with you.
Amazing. Yeah, Greg, thank you so much for joining. One of the things as we were getting ready for this, language, we talk about large language models and chat GPTs, but language was a perennial challenge in different business units, one of them being procurement and one of them being IT and, the rest of the business. They weren't always talking the same language. And that lack of a shared language was a real barrier for a lot of teams. Can you share a little bit more about how you overcame that previously? And then we can catch up on how AI is starting to play into that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. You would think having a common language would be foundational to a conversation, to collaboration. But the challenge is, and I've actually experienced this and been party to it, procurement speaks differently than does the business, right? Than does the supplier, than does the IT community. So what I've done to overcome that is I've actually put teams through sourcing training together. And we have a great common friend, Mark Rappin at Negotiation Ninja. I've leveraged Mark in his Negotiation Ninja training, as well as Sourcing Industry Group. There's a number of tools available in the market, but establishing a common language, not only within your team, and then when you're communicating to your customer or to the supplier community, think about the language in which they communicate in. And we've talked about this prepping for the call, what's in it for them concept. So thinking about not about what your needs are, but the needs of the receiving party and using their language and communicating in their terms is very important. It's interesting, spin analytics. The spin tools we'll talk about, UNSPSC, United Nations Statistical Processing. I forget the acronym, what it stands for.
Yep.
Part of the problem, right, is we use acronyms and lose sight of what the meaning of the acronym is. But they talk about 6 levels down into the UNSPSC to do data cleansing. That's not relevant to the business user. They want to talk to you about their chart of accounts, their PL account, the descriptions that they use. So something as simple as how we communicate to the business and having that common language is of the utmost importance.
Yeah, because they've got a budget and there's a GL account and there's spend flowing to those GL accounts. And I don't know too many people in operations or IT or other areas of the business, especially, deep field operations, often couldn't even tell you what UNSBC codes were. But they start to become the way procurement measures and then tries to communicate back to the business. And then sometimes people wonder why the business is saying, well, I don't know what that report means. Well, because this UNSBC code is going to, whoa, 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 hang on. And that shared language already starts to break down. And that idea of empathy, of talk to your customer, and in procurement, that customer is in the business and the customer is IT and the customer is, all of these other parts of the organization. And that ability to talk to them where they're at, talk to them in language that's meaningful for them, and the reporting showing up and being meaningful for them, and the questions that are asked around intake or procure to pay are sometimes a little mystical for somebody that hasn't been trained in procurement.
Right. Yeah, and it's taking away that mystique, right? I'm thinking of, I was going to use a movie reference and I didn't fully capture kind of the reference, so I'll stop there. But taking down the veil, the curtain, and seeing what's behind it, I think is important. And speaking to the customer, using their terminology and really understanding their business is important. And as you and I were talking earlier, artificial intelligence is going to play a key role in that because to use your term, which I love, it will equalize the playing field because now everyone will have access to the same knowledge set. Granted, how you deploy AI is going to be important because there's data privacy concerns. So what you make available to that large language model needs to be well thought out. But let's assume that you've overcome that obstacle. It will equalize the playing field with the business, with the supplier community, and more importantly, with your team, because now everyone will have access to that same knowledge base.
It helps people in just, if we think about the procurement teams or the supply chain teams, it helps them ask better questions. Because when you start to learn how to put in a situation and describe a situation you're facing to a team member, if you don't have that team member, and there's so many organizations that have a procurement team of 2 that should probably have a procurement team of 10, not so that they can do more manual work, but just so that they can actually get more strategic and not spend all day pushing DocuSigns around or worse, paper or PDFs. And that idea of digging deep for what really matters and getting good at asking questions. There's a few studies that are out already now of that equalization effect of people that had access to that GPT tool to start to ask better questions, to challenge and use prompts around the Socratic method and use prompts to help me think this through. What else am I missing? List pros and cons. What alternatives could I ask for to negotiate, ... There's so many of these options now. I love the way that equalizer is creating, and you used the term too, around directionally correct, not perfect. Can you share a little more about how somebody would take the output as directionally correct but not perfect?
Yeah, it's interesting. From a procurement lens perspective, we see it across various touch points with the customer today. The one that I think is most relevant is spend analytics. As we look at spend data, it informs the decision. And that decision is not perfect, or the recommendation is not perfect. It's directionally correct. It gives you guidance. The more that we leverage AI, it improves that directionally correct output. The probability of something occurring, the predictive or prescriptive result. So it gets much better, and it takes the human element, that confirmation bias becomes less and less. So you lose kind of that dimension of the human bias, and it becomes more fact-based, more directionally correct. And over time, the more data that's available in that large language model, the probability or the predictive or prescriptive result becomes more, I don't want to use the word perfect, but it moves towards perfection. So that's where I see it playing out, is with actionable insights around spend analytics. But also, you and I talked earlier about just ingesting opportunity from the business, asking the right questions, leveraging conversational AI, chat GPT, generative AI to ask the right questions based on all this data
Yeah.
provides a better experience to the business, to the customer, as well as supplier. If a supplier has an inquiry and think about supplier portals using AI, it provides a better experience to the supplier, to the business user, the internal customer when they want to do something, buy something, and it's not within a catalog, it's not within a punch out. They don't have the buy history on how it was bought previous. You're starting to share that knowledge with them to provide a better experience during ingestion of the opportunity.
Yeah, that ability to ask for what you need to be successful and getting better at asking good questions and getting the practice using tools to help you ask better questions, to help ask your customer better questions, to serve them better, because that ability to serve is so powerful. And that customer centricity, sometimes that big brother feeling that people might have about procurement of, oh, they're watching me and there's compliance and audit and everything else, if that perspective is shift as there to serve, there to help, the transition is so powerful. You were describing your philosophy, a philosophy that you commonly encounter and how that holds people back, and a philosophy that you've seen just unlock potential and let people run. Can you share a little more about that? Because that feels so important for folks.
Yeah, I experienced this at VSP, and we talked about journeys. So the journey Oracle was, let's say, interesting. I spent 10 years at Oracle as their chief procurement officer, and the operating environment was very draconian command and control. It is what it is. So if I wanted to get something done, I would go to the CFO and say, this is what I want. This is why I want it. And if I were to get her support, she would then message it and make sure that people understood this is what we're doing. If you don't like it, there's the door. So it was very, if you will, black and white in that regard. Went to Salesforce, less than 1 billion in revenue, employee number 2,400 range. So different operating environment, very entrepreneurial, getting things done based on the needs of the business, but yet focused on hyper growth, less about cost control, but we wanted to make levers available to the CFO. So we engaged the business to make sure that we were doing the right thing for the organization. At VSP, tenured staff, little different, not for profit, little different operating model. They introduced me to this concept of what's in it for me, as well as what's in it for them. So we focused on what's in it for them. Everything that we did was hyper focused on outcomes for the need, based on the needs of the business. So it changed kind of this operating model, the focus philosophy to what's in it for them, rather than what's in it for me, which quite frankly was more akin to the Oracle model, around compliance and, why we did things. So again, it was at VSP that I was exposed to what's in it for them. It fundamentally has changed how I think and how I implement technology and how I up-level the team, because every investment that we make was not about for us. It was about what value or benefit would be gained by the customer for doing something.
I love it. So, Greg, when you talk about that philosophy of being customer centric and you emphasize for folks the what's in it for them, this really gets to the heart of the service of procurement and putting service back into procurement to enable. There's so many procurement organizations that are stuck in the you shall cost save, except the value focus is harder. It's a little trickier to measure. It's a little trickier to unlock how you're removing barriers for growth. And that's such a powerful differentiation in an organization to get genuinely value focused. There's so many technology solutions that are out there. And I know all of the large vendors would love to say we've got one solution and kind of one ring to rule them all. But what I'm curious about is what you're seeing in that procure tech space and what you see unlocking potential and helping to bring that customer centric focus back to organizations and procurement teams to genuinely serve?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I have to be cognizant of who your audience is. It's SAP, which is a suite, right? It's an Indian suite offering. They do complement with technology. They have their app store, so they introduce, if you will, complementary technology. And my background, Oracle was the suite, right? And we were expected to use Oracle wall to wall. But I'm a proponent of best of breed. So I like complementary solutions that are best in breed versus wall to wall. So being cognizant of who your audience is, I'm trying to tread lightly.
I think it's better to speak from experience and why you believe that that will unlock more value. I think there's organizations out there that have an SAP first strategy, and I think there's huge value in that. The danger becomes when that gets myopic, or that there's only one source of solution, and or if you do that, that you don't need anything else. I find that to be the danger of the pendulum being too far over on one side, or if you go all the way to the other end of best of breed, then the integration tax to go and wire everything together can be really, really tricky. Just like Larry found out some time ago with Fusion middleware to wire everything together, or SAP to some extent with multiple different pieces that are a suite. But if you change a PO here, does that PO change automatically go all the way through? And you can maybe see where that's not always the case. So yeah, go ahead. Like this is about you shining your light for the community here.
Thank you. So it is interesting. We talked about customer centricity. What's in it for them? If you have a perspective of you're hyper focused on the customer, the internal business user, the supplier community, it's going to lead you down the path of best of breed. What's in it for them from an IT perspective is they want a single point of solution from an API perspective, right? They want to manage all their APIs out of one platform, minimize the APIs, have them embedded within the product so everyone talks to each other out of the box. The problem with that approach, yes, it serves IT. The problem with that approach is it doesn't serve the customer, because the reality is a lot of suite solutions, I'll just be blunt, they've created shelfware from a marketing standpoint to position their product as wall to wall or a suite of products, and it's not best in breed. So it sits on the shelf, doesn't get used, poorly adopted, and it doesn't serve the customer experience expectation. And the way you drive adoption of technology is you focus on the customer, make the customer first, what's in it for them. By driving adoption, you get better traction in the technology, you get better throughput, better spend visibility, yes, better compliance, spend under management, but also line of sight and engagement with the business to better serve them. I love the way that you expressed this earlier. You're serving the customer, you're not serving IT, you're not serving yourself. It needs to be focused on the customer. And by focusing on the customer, it will naturally lead you down a path of best in breed.
Yeah, I have to agree, because focusing on the customer and where they are, we routinely see organizations that are relatively immature going out and buying, and it kind of breaks my heart, because somewhere somebody felt like it was a good idea and got excited about it, but they'll buy this much when they have appetite and perhaps budget to implement this much. And that for sure creates shelfware and or creates a pain point later on of, well, if we were going to buy and implement all of this, we expect this much value. Whereas if you buy this and do that well, get adoption on it, unlock value. Buy this. And there's for sure, there's people out there in sales roles that will probably listen to this and all get some messages that, why, how dare you? But that's okay, because it's about the customer, and there's people out there selling, the 2-year, $80 million transformations. And I have a hard time getting behind those, obviously, as anybody that's watched the show for a while knows, because if you're doing it with a bigger vision and you're taking bite-sized steps towards it, yes, you need it to work together. Yes, you need it to work and play. But if it's not unlocking adoption, you're not really getting the value that you wanted. and over-indexing. If the pendulum swings so far to one side of over-indexing to one software provider, it starts to eliminate some of the competition, and it closes a door to some of the other solutions that if you bring in a few of those and kind of, I love to see the pendulum down in the middle somewhere, that
Well said.
opens up doors and unlocks potentials in ways that maybe were not the core strength of a single suite provider.
Yeah, well said. And shame on the sales professional that is not solution selling to solve a pain rather than selling their suite, right? If they're focused on solving the pain, it will naturally lead them down a path of solving for that, meeting the customer's expectations, keeping the door open, keeping the conversation productive, value focused. So again, shame on the salesperson that sells their suite thinking it's a panacea to solve all the pains without understanding what the problematic issues are and partnering with the customer to solution sell.
Yeah, when the business case gets big enough, it's real convenient when you can say, that's okay, it just does that. But there's always things that are down in the weeds that come back to bite you later. And that becomes part of the capacity to understand and plan for those really, really big transformations, is you start to glaze over so many of the details. And you
Right.
end up, 3 months, 6 months into the implementation going, shit, it doesn't do that.
I love the technical term. Shit, it doesn't do that.
Oh shit. It's the technical term, and it's heard on almost every project. So taking smaller bites means you identify those and you're biting off something smaller. You're so much less likely to realize that, that last quarter of your business case just went kapoof because you found that moment. Greg.
Or you're going to lose the renewal. I know we're at time, John. I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Greg. Deeply appreciate you. And for everybody watching, thanks so much. It's on YouTube. It's on LinkedIn. Find that subscribe button. And thanks again for watching another episode for the never-ending climb for a stronger supply chain and procurement for companies running SAP. Thanks, everyone.